I never expected that a routine stroll through my own neighborhood would ignite a firestorm that left Karen Spencer humiliated on 3 local news stations. But that afternoon when she phoned 911 to evict me from my own driveway marked the moment my quiet life erupted into a spectacle of truth and vindication. I'd returned home from an early morning meeting, my truck heavy with equipment for the community garden project I'd volunteered to oversee. Sunlight glinted off the polished chrome as I turned onto Maplewood Lane. And there she stood in her trademark pastel cardigan, arms crossed, lips pursed like she was about to deliver the verdict on world peace. In her hand she brandished a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws, dog-eared and scrawled with her furious notes. Without a word she jabbed a finger at my license plate. "You're not allowed to park here," she barked. I raised an eyebrow. "This is my driveway," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "You live on Elm Street." "Actually," I replied, unhooking my keys from my belt. "I've owned number 12 for 7 years, registered in HOA records, tax rolls, the works." She huffed. "Not anymore." I chuckled. "What are you talking about?" She pressed a button on her phone, her manicured nails clicking. "I'm calling 911 to have you removed." My jaw dropped. "For parking on my property?" "Trespassing," she insisted. "By HOA decree." I grabbed my phone. "Let me record this." She waved me off. "Call if you want, but I'll win." Several minutes later, I watched her through the front windshield, pacing with the fury of a hawk guarding her nest. Then the sirens. Except they never came. Instead my phone rang. 911, what's your emergency? Karen snarled into the mic. "There's a man trespassing on Maplewood. Please hold." The calm female voice replied. Karen froze. "What's wrong?" "Ma'am," the dispatcher said evenly. "The address you're calling about belongs to our supervisor, Officer Martinez. He's on his way home now." Silence. I lowered my phone and stepped from my truck as Karen's face went pale. She dropped her phone, stumbling backward into her rose bushes. Within moments she was scrambling to dial back, stumbling apologies that sounded like a startled child. I watched as her neighbors, Mrs. Patel, the retired schoolteacher, Mr. Nguyen, the landscaper, old Mrs. Thompson, peeked from their porches, eyes glinting with schadenfreude. Word spread fast. By evening I saw comments flooding the neighborhood app. "Did you hear? HOA boss calls HOA Karen out. Can't wait for the video." And there it was. My recording shared across social feeds, playing on local blogs, even reposted by the county sheriff's department as a cautionary tale about know your rights. Karen's reign of petty terror crumbled overnight. Yet the drama was far from over. The next morning, as I loaded tools for the garden cleanup, I found a letter taped to my gate. HOA Spencer, President. You are hereby ordered to cease all community projects until a full review of your illegal landscaping is complete. I laughed and tucked it into my pocket. Instead of retreating, I invited the entire blockies, every neighbor, including Corrento, a public meeting at the park gazebo. I posted flyers, tapped the local reporter, even set up chairs and refreshments. Word spread. The community garden showdown. On the day of, a crowd gathered under summer clouds. Karen arrived, clipboard in hand, scanning the faces. I stepped forward to address them. "Last week I stood up for my rights when Karen here accused me of trespassing on my own property. Today I stand before you to reclaim our neighborhood spirit. This garden is for all of us, flowers for Mrs. Thompson's butterflies, herbs for Mrs. Patel's cooking club, and fresh produce for the school lunch program." A murmur of approval. Karen cleared her throat. "Actually, according to bylaws, I interrupted gently. The HOA board must approve any project with a 2/3 majority. We have that majority right here among our neighbors." Heads nodded. Someone unfurled a petition, signatures spreading like wildfire. Karen's smile faltered, her authority slipping through her fingers. That afternoon, as volunteers dug beds and planted seeds, I saw Karen at the edge of the crowd, arms pinched, cheeks flushed. I handed her a trowel. "Would you like to plant a tomato?" She stared, hesitated, then took it. As she gently pushed the soil around the seedling, her shoulders relaxed. Later, in private, I found her apology note tucked under my windshield wiper. "I'm sorry for overstepping. I'll follow the process next time. Sincerely, Karen Spencer, HOA President." It was a start. By week's end she joined our weekend workdays, us both shoulder-deep in compost, laughter blending with birdsong. The garden flourished. More than that, our fractured community found a new rhythm, neighborly respect replacing petty rules. And Karen? She learned that leadership means listening before lording authority. Our project became a model for nearby associations, featured in the county newsletter with photos of neighbors planting side by side. But the sweetest payoff came when I received an unexpected call. The dispatcher who'd set Karen straight invited me to speak at the annual HOA convention about citizen rights and community engagement. I agreed, because sometimes turning the tables means planting seeds of change. Let me know if you think I was right or wrong. As dawn broke over Maplewood Lane, I found myself stirring with anticipation rather than dread, because the garden had become more than a patch of soil. It was a battleground where every seed planted was an act of defiance against petty tyranny. That morning I arrived to find Karen already there, kneeling by the new herb bed, her pastel cardigan swapped for work gloves and a scuffed denim apron. She looked up, eyes uneasy, then managed a small smile as I approached. "Morning," she mumbled. "I made coffee." She handed me a thermos, the familiar floral china pattern chipped at the Rima gift from Mrs. Patel during the first workday. It felt symbolic. Broken pieces given new purpose. I nodded my thanks and set to work, trowel in hand, side by side with the woman who had tried to evict me hours after accusing me of trespassing on my own property. As we labored, our shared silence felt less awkward than the shouting match on my driveway, and I realized something profound: redemption often requires elbow grease. Later that afternoon, when the local HOA board convened for their monthly meeting, I received an unexpected invitation to speak about our project's impact on community cohesion. I arrived to find Karen already in the meeting room, perched at the end of the long table, her clipboard and bylaws nowhere in sight. The other board members glanced up as I entered, curious. I cleared my throat and began recounting the events: the 911 call, the dispatcher's gentle correction, the way neighbors rallied around a common cause despite Karen's attempt to micromanage. I spoke without notes, my voice steady, painting the garden not only as a collection of raised beds and trellises, but as a living testament to neighborly solidarity triumphing over fear and bureaucracy. At first, the room was silent. Then one board member leaned forward. "So you're saying that what began as a conflict ended up unifying the block?" I met their gaze. "Exactly. When we invited everyone, even those who opposed us at first, to participate, they discovered they cared more about fresh tomatoes and butterfly gardens than enforcing every obscure clause in the bylaws." Heads nodded, pens scratching on notepads. Karen shifted in her seat. I paused and turned to her. "Would you like to add anything?" Her throat bobbed. For a moment I worried she'd revert to legalese. Instead she took a breath and said, "I underestimated how powerful shared purpose can be. I thought rules alone would keep us organized, but I see now they can divide us if we wield them without empathy." Gasps rippled around the table. "I propose," she continued, voice gaining confidence, "that we amend our bylaws to require any new project to include a community outreach period, so neighbors can vote with their feet rather than feeling bullied." The chair pecked his pen thoughtfully and then called for a vote. Unanimously, the board approved the amendment, transforming Karen from antagonist to advocate. As I left the meeting, lanterns of dusk glowing overhead, a neighbor stopped me on the sidewalk. "I read about your speech," she whispered. "Thank you for showing us how to turn frustration into something beautiful." I smiled, thinking of the rows of basil, rosemary, and wildflowers waiting for tomorrow's harvest. But the real victory wasn't in the soil. It was in hearts changed. The next weekend, neighbors brought jars of homemade jam, hand-painted signs, and tales of how the garden had prompted them to reconnect after years of silence. Even Karen confessed she'd never felt more alive leading a volunteer crew rather than waving a rulebook. Yet beneath the triumph I sensed a final test looming. That Monday, I received a cease and desist letter bearing a seal from an outside law firm claiming the HOA lacked authority to host community events on common grounds without a public permit. Their demand: halt the garden or face litigation. It reeked of corporate intimidation, of a large developer poking around to find fault and profit from communal goodwill. I called Karen. "Guess who's back with a vengeance?" I said, waving the letter. Her response was immediate. "Meet me at the gazebo in 30. When I arrived, I found her pacing, phone to her ear as she negotiated with the HOA attorney her own legal counsel. "I'm telling them we'll handle the permit. This is our project and we own it," she said, grinding her teeth so hard I could hear the clack in her voice. She hung up and turned to me. "I found a loophole. We file for a community use permit next week. Free of charge since we're a non-profit club under municipal code." Relief washed over me as I realized Karen had marshaled her old playbook researching bylaws, legal definitions, but this time to defend, not demolish. We spent the afternoon drafting the permit application together, her meticulous notes blending seamlessly with my vision for the garden's expansion into a compost workshop and children's pollinator seminar. By Friday we stood before the city council, 20 neighbors in tow, each offering personal remarks on how the garden had rekindled community ties. When the council unanimously approved our permit, the applause echoed like a chorus of victory. It wasn't just approval for potted marigolds, it was affirmation that neighbors could claim agency over their own streets. As I clutched the signed permit, I caught Karen's eye. She gave a tight smile that said more than any apology note ever could. Weeks later we celebrated the garden's first harvest festival under strings of fairy lights. Tables creaked under the weight of fresh greens, zucchini bread, lavender sachets, and jars of pickles crafted by Mrs. Thompson, who'd tasted them only after we coaxed her to attend. Karen stood beside me at the entrance, welcoming guests with a genuine warmth I'd never seen before. When a young mother approached, worried about pesticide runoff, Karen knelt to show her our natural pest control methods, referencing her by name rather than her title. Later that night a photographer snapped a photo of us laughing, arms around each other, tomato sauce on our overalls. The image went viral locally under the caption "From Feud to Friendship: How One HOA Karen Found Community." The following day I received messages from neighborhood associations across the county wanting advice. I realized our story had become a blueprint for transforming conflict into collaboration. Then came the sweetest twist. The dispatcher who'd saved me from eviction invited both of us to co-host a webinar on civic engagement. As we crafted our presentation slides, Karen quipped, "I never thought I'd share a stage with the guy I tried to trespass." I laughed, replying, "And I never believed I'd see the day you'd lead a workshop on building community instead of tearing it apart." On the eve of the webinar, I reflected on the journey from a petty parking dispute to a county-wide movement. I thought of the wooden sign that had started it all. "Don't mess with the manager." In the end, it became a symbol of standing up for oneself and then standing up for others. In the closing moments of our webinar, Karen and I looked at the virtual audience and posed a simple question. Did we do the right thing? Was it fair for me to challenge her authority? Or did Karen deserve every bit of her comeuppance before finding redemption? The chat flooded with responses, some saying justice had to sting first, others praising the power of forgiveness. And that, I realized, was the true victory. Sparking conversation about what it means to be a neighbor, a leader, a friend. So what do you think? Was I justified in turning the tables on Karen? Or did our story show that sometimes the bitterest conflicts can yield the sweetest blooms?